couple things that I thought would be great videos for you guys. The first thing I'm going to be doing tonight is I'm making a flatbread. And flatbreads are awesome because you don't have to wait for the yeast to work, for them to rise or anything else. You just mix the ingredients together quick on the skillet and they're done. So I was getting ready to measure everything up here so I could show you. And I thought, let me include you when it comes to getting the flour out of the bag. Now, I always like to use unbleached flour. I'll talk about that more in another video. And most of the time, all-purpose flour is going to be just fine. So that's usually what I have the most of. When you take flour out of the bag and put it into what you're going to use to measure, I've got a 2-cup measure here. You want to make sure that it gets a little, move it around a little bit. Let a little air in there, okay? If you just pack it tight, like if you just scoop the flour out of the bag and then level it off, it's gonna be actually thicker and it's gonna make a more dense finished product than if you make sure it's kind of light and fluffy. You can sift it, which is fantastic. There are recipes I definitely do sift. But for main purposes, as long as you're doing something, take a little spoon, mix it around, something like that. Just do that. And that's going to be plenty good enough without having to worry about getting fancy, getting a sifter or anything like that. Just use your flour. So many years ago in my home ec class in high school, my teacher then told me to always use a spoon to take the flour out of the bag, and that makes it a little fluffier than just, like I said, just throwing the scoop in there and scooping it and packing it tight. So that's what I'm doing now. And I'm just measuring out like 2 cups of flour that I need for this recipe. I'm popping that in there. And then when you get close, the other thing you want to think about anytime you're measuring anything, liquids especially, your perspective is off when you're looking down at it like I am right now. So you want to make sure you're really getting it up at eye level. And am I at the mark that I want to be at? And this looks like just about 2 cups, so that's going to be perfect. So I'm going to put that down here. Now let me get this flour out of the way because it was kind of a last minute decision to throw the camera on right there. So I'll put it over here. All right. Now what I really love about this flatbread, well, I'm going to turn the stove on. Okay. What I really like about this flatbread, or what I like to do when I make it, is there's milk and there's butter that's called for in the recipe. I like to warm them up. So if you warm them up a little bit on the stove, it just makes that dough a little bit easier to work with. And you might find that it's a little bit, like I said, easier to work with, makes a nicer dough to work with. Whatever, I'm saying work with too many times. Okay, put that over there. So, all right, so I got my bowl here. I got my recipe. And I think I've got all my products measured out. So the first thing I'm going to do, I got my cup of milk here. I'm going to take this, and it also calls for a tablespoon of butter. This is probably like a little bit more than a tablespoon, but it's going to be close enough, and I'm going to use it. This is butter that I kept on the counter. I always have sticks of butter on the counter. If you have butter that's still wrapped in the paper, it has marks on there where you can see and you can cut exactly 1 tablespoon to throw it in. So if you're comfortable doing that, that's fine. This I'm just going to use up because this one's been sitting out. So rather than cut into a brand new one, I'll use this up. So I'm going to put this, and I'm going to put the milk into the pan so it can be warmed up a little bit while we're making this recipe. Okay, so hold on. Okay, now about the same time that I throw that milk in, I'm also putting the heat on the skillet that I'm going to be using for the flatbread. So I've got one little pot that's got warming up my milk and my butter. I've got my skillet that's on the stove, and that's warming up, so it'll be ready when we're ready to make our bread. Okay, so all right, so what I got 2 cups of flour that we just talked about. I'm going to throw that in here. And then get in there. Everything else is a 1/2 teaspoon. So that makes it super easy. I got a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. I got a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. Now your baking soda and your baking powder are what's going to help lift that bread and make it more of a bread instead of just like a flat pancake. Okay. And then I got a little bit, 1/2 teaspoon of white sugar. Throw that in there. And then I got a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder and a 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder. Okay. Ooh, that one's sticking a little bit. Pour it in there. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So now that I got all those mixed together, I got my dough whisk. And I'm going to use this first with these dry ingredients, just to make sure everything gets mixed in together. There's nothing fancy or special about that. It's pretty straightforward. You just, want to make sure that little teaspoon of baking powder is getting mixed out through that whole 2 cups of flour. So this is a dough whisk. You can use a regular whisk for this. Also, that's totally fine. When we add in the wet ingredients, you might find that like a regular whisk, it's going to get stuck in there. So don't mess with that, okay? If you don't have a dough whisk, once you mix in your wet ingredients, I would use a spoon or something to get it mixed in together and then knead it by hand. So, all right, so this is pretty much ready to go. And then we're just waiting for our milk and our butter to heat up. So give me just a second and then we'll continue forward with that. Okay, so I pulled the milk and the butter off the stove. You can probably see a little steam coming off the top. That's all you're looking for. You are not looking to boil this. If you boil your milk, you are going to be very unhappy. All you're looking to do is usually throw the milk in, throw the butter in. By the time the butter is melted, that's enough heat. You don't have to worry about anything more than that, okay? So this, it's probably heated just a hair more than it needs to be. But you'll see a little bit of steam coming up and you'll have the butter will be melted and then you're done. And I just heat this usually up on on an electric stove, like a number 4 or 5, low to medium heat. Because if you do it too high, too fast, you're gonna burn that milk and it's gonna be ruined, okay? So slow and steady is usually what you wanna do when it comes to cooking. So, all right, so now I'm just gonna be adding my wet ingredients to my dry ingredients. Pretty straightforward. Pour it on in there. I'm just gonna mix it up. Okay, now on this you can see, how well you can see this, it's still just a little wet. It's not like a super dry dough. So I probably am going to add a little bit of flour to this, but I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. Let me get my cups out of the way here. And grab my flour. I get too anxious to put things away and clean up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my flour, and I've already cleaned this counter surface so it's ready for bread. I'm just going to take and sprinkle some flour around here, okay? I'll put a little bit heavier in the middle, just like that. Perfect. Keep this off to the side, keep it out of the camera. I'm going to take this dough and I'm going to drop it right on top of that flour. So like I said, it's still pretty wet, and if you drop it straight onto your countertop or if you try and grab it, it's going to stick. It's going to stick to your hands, it's going to stick to your countertop, and you don't want that because that's just a mess for everybody. All right, so that's pretty much it there. All right, you can see it's sticking to my hands a bit, so I try and pull it off the whisk, but a little bit's okay. So all right, I'm going to throw a little bit more flour on top, just so that I can work it without getting it to stick to me. All right, now as you move this around, you're going to feel it's really soft, which is really kind of nice. Really easy to move around. See, I got a little stick into the counter over there. Just peel it off, throw it back in. No harm, no foul. And then you're just going to move this around a few times. When you knead it, that helps to activate the gluten in there and helps to give your bread, makes it a little airier, a little lighter, which is nice. Which is what we want in our bread. We don't want to be eating a brick. All right, now you may find if anytime your hands start to stick to this, throw a little more flour in there. It's not going to hurt anything, okay? All right, after we've worked it a little bit here, we're going to let it sit for just a minute. I'm going to see it starting to stick on the top. I don't know if you can tell. So I'm going to throw a little more flour just so that it stays nice and easy to work. And if it sticks to your hands, you can usually kind of rub it off, get it thrown back in there. So it goes without saying, make sure your hands are clean before you do this. All right, that's good there. All right, I'm gonna leave that sit there for just a minute. All right, a couple couple other utensils that are very nice to have. One is necessary, one is nice. This is a rolling pin. I usually use my wood rolling pin. I have a ceramic one as well, but this is the one I usually end up using the most, I guess because my mom did. And this is like a little, oh, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's like a little, it's a scraper, and they use it with pastries and stuff that if you're sticking to your countertop, you can use this to just kind of push it up off of your countertop, okay? And it's really not going to scratch anything up. Shouldn't scratch anything up. I have a metal one, and then you can also, you can find them, I've seen rubber ones, plastic ones, so forth. So see, it's just a little bit of sitting there, so I'm just going to scrape that off so that my surface stays nice and easy to work. All right, so what I'm going to do for this flatbread recipe is, this is not going to go in all one piece. It's going to be several little pieces. So I'm just going to start making little balls if I can here. And I don't want them to be too big. About that might be just a little on the big side. But about like that. This usually makes about, see, it's sticking to me, so I'm going to add a little more flour just to get it to not stick. Yeah, I usually get about 9 of these maybe, something like that. And it's usually something that you'd make for the meal that you're about to have. You know, sometimes you make a loaf of bread ahead of time or whatnot, but this is going to be more like you're going to make it and eat it. And I definitely have used it in leftovers and so forth, but it's always better when it's fresh. I mean, what's better than warm bread, right? Okay, so just make up, like I said, you know, about that size, whatever size you want, but this works pretty well for me. Like I said, it usually gets me about 9 of them. That's a little bit too big. And just pull it off if it's too big. All right, sticking to me. Anytime it's sticking, just pop a little more flour in there, you'll be good. All right. And now when I get to this point, my skillet is heating up, and I don't want to waste too much time, okay? Because this is going to start to, these little balls are going to start to get dry, and my skillet's going to get hot, and if I wait too awful long, it's going to start to smoke, which is not ideal. But you do want the skillet to be nice and warm, because that's what's going to make it nice and easy to come back off the skillet and make these nice little, make this nice little bread. You don't want it all stuck to everything. All right. Oh, I think I'm going to end up with about 11 is what I've got here. And again, like I said, you can make them bigger or smaller, whatever works for you. That's what you do. Yeah, make a couple little smaller ones. I just don't want one too big because then it's not proportioned right for the food. Okay, we've got all our little balls here. They're ready to go. Okay, and I think our skillet should be ready to go because it's been heating for a little while. Take one of these and put a little flour on top of it. Okay, I put a little flour on my rolling pin. It's not going to stay, so don't make it like super heavy, but just a light coating. And then I'm going to squish this sucker down and start rolling it out. And I don't know if you can see that on the camera very well. Every time I roll, that dough kind of stretches and then it kind of comes back. And that's the gluten in there that makes the stretchiness. So this has got good stretch, but I made a terrible circle. So we'll have to just get by with it. We'll be all right. And you may make terrible circles. It's going to taste the same. So that's what's important. All right. And it's really paper thin at this point, really thin. I don't know if you can even see, like you can see the light coming through that, really thin, okay? And that's why you need to have a well-floured surface, otherwise that sucker's gonna stick, and you don't want that, okay? So, all right, so there's that, and I'm going to put a little bit of lard on my skillet because I like to do it, and it will smoke a little bit, but that's okay. I'm gonna put okay, so just a little bit of lard on here, just to make it a little bit smooth. I do like to use cast iron, so I will use a metal skillet or a metal spatula to go with that, which God knows where I've left it. I don't want that one. Okay, still in the dishwasher, just got it cleaned up from earlier today. So Yeah, I think we've got... Okay, so I just turned off the wrong burner from my pan that I took off of there. So we're gonna give this just another minute to heat back up before we throw our bread on here, because that was kind of a bonehead thing to do. Oh, mercy. Okay, give me a minute, I'll be back with you. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I made a mistake by trying to I was really just trying to rush. So I put this bread on before the skillet got too hot, and it's gonna be fine. I'll probably eat it myself because it's not gonna have the presentation that I would like, but it is cooked. You can see the little brown bits on there. So we're gonna take this one off because it's fine, and then we'll start fresh with the next one, and hopefully that one will show up a little bit better for you. I'm gonna pop just a little bit more of my lard onto my skillet. So it's nice, got a little slick surface. Perfect. All right, now hopefully this will do better. All right, this is the next one I already got rolled out. And you can hear a little sizzle right away. That's a good sign. We're off to a good start. I'm not even worried about that little corner sticking up right there. Who cares? Nobody cares about that. You see how it's starting to bubble up? Can you see those little bubbles that are starting to come in the bread? That's kind of what you're watching for. That's what you're looking for. It kind of goes back to when you're doing pancakes. You're looking for those bubbles underneath the bread to know that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And this isn't going to take terribly long, maybe a minute or so, and then it'll be ready to flip over, and we'll be able to kind of see what it looks like when it's done, which is always rewarding. Meanwhile, I'm going to take a minute and roll out the next one. Okay, you see it's got the bubbles. We're good there. Let's flip it over and see what it's looking like. You see it's kind of stiff now too? You want that. Flip her over. Look at that. Doesn't that look lovely? I don't know if you can even see that very well. Let's see, get nice and close. Oh, it looks just like a little restaurant burrito. That's kind of what you're going for. Get you back in position here. And then... usually when I'm on my second side, it's picked up a little bit of that lard, so it's got just a little bit of a moist surface, and I throw a little salt on there. Just a sprinkle. Bam. And we've got the next one rolled out and ready to go. So you're going to have about another minute on this side, and then it's going to be done. It's fantastic. Quick and easy, tastes amazing, and you can put whatever you want in there, you know, for whatever kind of sandwich. See, that's got nice, lovely color. So that one's done. Let's pop a little more lard on our surface just to keep it nice and smooth. That'll be good enough. Aha! See, it's going to smoke a little bit. So just if it does that, that is okay. That doesn't mean anything bad. That's why we use lard instead of butter, because it doesn't burn. If you use butter in this scenario, it's going to burn. All right, pop on the next one. I like to kind of lay it out. Whoops. There we go. Now I'm going to start rolling out the next one. All right. See all those bubbles coming up there? That means it's time to flip this sucker. Whoops. Very forgiving stuff. Look at that. Put a little salt on there. And it gets about the same amount of time on the other side. So I'm going to finish these out, and then I'll meet you back. Okay, I just had to jump back on here for a second real quick to say, look at those glorious bubbles. Woo! And sometimes you'll get like a big bubble in the middle. That's okay. Just knock it down. That's no big deal. Nothing to worry about if your bubbles look kind of like big and giant, like they're trying to take over the world. So, but look at these. Oh! And the other nice thing about having that little bit of lard in the pan is that helps your salt stick. See? Big bubbles. That's all right. Just knock them down. And then I pour my salt on here. And if you notice that it's smoking too much or you're starting to have trouble with it, turn your heat down a little bit. That probably means your heat's too high. Okay? All right. All right, my lovelies. Look at this. We have our bread. It's all ready to go and it's lovely. So I have brought you along while I'm making a whole dinner tonight. So this is my flatbread recipe. I'm also going to be making a tzatziki sauce and lamb meatballs. So feel free. I'm going to put those, separate them up into different videos in case you don't want everything. So check out my other videos for that, and we'll see you. Don't be afraid to do this. You can do this. You can make food happen.